Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for being here. We're so glad to have you today. My name is Christina Helmick, and I serve as the curator in charge of the Department of the Arts of Africa, Oceania, and the Americas, and I worked with Kirti Basandine to present the exhibition that you have, maybe some of you have had a chance to see in the Kimball Education Gallery. I'd like to begin this afternoon with the museum's land acknowledgement. The Fine Arts Museums of San Francisco occupy unceded land of the Ramaytush Ohlone, who are the original inhabitants of what is now the San Francisco Peninsula. The Greater Bay Area is also the ancestral territory of other Ohlone peoples, as well as the Miwok, Yokuts, and Patwin. We acknowledge, recognize, and honor the Indigenous ancestors, elders, and descendants whose nations and communities have lived in the Bay Area over many generations and continue to do so today. We respect the enduring relationships that exist between Indigenous peoples and their homelands. We are committed to partnering with Indigenous communities to raise awareness of their legacy and engage with the history of this region and the impacts of genocide and the dynamics of settler colonialism that persist. Thank you. So just a few program notes. If you didn't have an opportunity to meet a photographer whose work is featured in the exhibition, Kirti Basandine, I'm sure you can find her in the exhibition after this program. And there's also a wonderful Q&A that's available on the webpage for the exhibition. So we really thank Kirti for sharing her work with us. It's my great pleasure to introduce Greg Castro, a longtime friend and partner of the DeYoung, who will be chairing the panel discussion with Linda Yamane and Valentin Lopez, and he will provide their introductions. But Greg Castro is a writer-activist within the California Indigenous community who has worked to preserve his Ohlone and Salinan heritage for over 3 decades. He is the Society for California Archaeology's Native American Programs Committee chairperson and a facilitator for the annual California Indian Conference, a 30-plus year gathering about California Indigenous culture. He is a founder, advisor to the California Indian History Curriculum Coalition, based at CSU, Sacramento, that promotes accurate school curriculum. He is culture director for the Association of Ramaytush Ohlone, advising within their San Francisco Peninsula homelands. Thank you so much.
I have to put on my traditional specs here so I can read. Shamasakesh, Mishistu, Hushatuhi. Greetings to you all. Thank you for coming today. And I want to acknowledge the many participants besides our honored panelists here who are part of the exhibit upstairs and their supporters here. And especially acknowledge one of our dear elders that's up front here, Anne-Marie Sayers. Thank you so much for coming today. That's so important for us. As you're about to discover, I'm pretty informal. I'm not into, stiffy kind of panels. We speak from the heart, and that's the best way I do it. And I think for my panelists, that's true as well. And so we're not going to do any rigid organization here other than time, which Native people have their own timepieces. We'll see if we can conform to business like DeYoung time today. Before we start, a couple of things administrative on my part. As some of you know, have seen me online or otherwise, my clapper stick and this rattle. And this rattle, I have to reintroduce myself to, even though I've had it for over a quarter of a century. It was made for me for my 25th wedding anniversary by Linda. And it got a bit raggedy over the years to where the other day when I saw Linda, she took it out of my hands. Not quite. And I thought it would be a couple more weeks, but she repaired it in 2 days. And so handed it to me just recently, and I have to reacquaint myself. Let's see if it sounds, it sounds great, actually. It sounds better than ever. I think she put an amplifier in it, actually. So I'm going to do something I usually don't do because it's here in Ramaytush land. amongst all the mission communities that were affected by colonization, Ramaytush was sort of at the most devastating end, where virtually all of our culture was taken from us. We only have a very short word list. We have no songs, no ceremonies, no stories that we'd be able to find. So at Native gatherings, we got to do something, and usually it's song. So I've, a long time ago, asked Linda if I could sing some of the songs she taught me, but I almost never sing them in front of her. I make her get up front and I follow her. And this is a particularly tough one, but I sing it a lot around here because, like Monterey, where the song came from, San Francisco has issues with fog. And so this is the Rumsen fog song. I'm going to make an attempt. I'll try to not look this way to the left. I'm going to have my grandson come up here sing it with me right now. You may recognize him.
And did you know when you sing it?
Oh, wait a minute. Okay, that's your job.
Nope. I got the clap in my hands.
So let's see how this goes. I'll find out when I sit down next to her. So the reason I sing this song, many years ago, one of the first encounters I had with a very old elder who lived in her homeland and did not know English or even see a white person until they were in their 20s. Her name was Elizabeth Case. She lived along the Klamath River, and she was born around the turn of the century. And the fact that there was people like that was amazing to me many years ago. It's not so amazing now. And the fact that she was immersed in her culture. She lived as her ancestors did thousands of years ago along the Klamath, living off the land in harmony with it, together with it, because that land is what created her people. And when I saw her in an interview in a room, she stopped everybody and said, "Put down your cameras and your recorders. I'm going to sing a song to clear the room." And I asked her later, it's like, what was that about? She says, just like baskets, just like everything we make, what we put into it is what comes out of it. So we need to put good things into it. And sometimes we need to clear the area and clear ourselves. So that's what, to me, is the fog song is really important for. So thank you, Linda, for teaching it to me. Hopefully I learned it decently enough. Arapa Chitijuan Wasiahayam 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 Arapa Chitijuan Wasiahayam. It's Panikan. Thank you. I thunked that up. Hopefully you guys know what I mean. But as I've been answering lots of questions and I've been doing much of the work over the last 30 plus years and understanding myself, the newcomers came and defined us their own way for their own convenience by language and dialect and sort of thing. That's not how we defined ourselves and understood ourselves to be for thousands of years. It was by places on the earth where our stories told us we were created. So we were land-based. And as I got to know more, and elders taught me, sometimes having to grab me by the throat, okay, listen, we're not just on the land, we're of the land. And as I learned my own father's stories from the Salinan people and understood better about the place that we called our origin place at the foot of a mountain we call Statyokale, and later on became called Santa Lucia Peak. It's in the Santa Lucia mountain range in Los Padres National Forest now. And our stories tell us we were made from the elderberry at the base of our mountain. And elderberry is very important to us, obviously, for the clapper sticks that so many California communities use, because it tells us the stories that we ourselves are made of elderberry, animated by the spirit of Creator. And that's what binds us through the land that connects us all. So it's the land that's important. And obviously it's become more important recently because of climate crisis and because of the calamities that have been happening on our homelands with fire and burning up much of our homelands and landscapes, and also towns and sadly people as well. And so agencies and organizations have come to us and finally and said, with a more open heart than I've ever seen, what can we do? What can you share with us? And this is part of that process that we're going to talk about today. So let me wander over here.
So at the event at the Exploratorium in the spring, I saw the rattle that I'd made him more than 25 years ago, but I didn't recognize it. And he goes, yeah, this is what, I was like, no. I said, and don't you be telling anybody I made that for you either. No, that is not what it looked like. And when we get a chance, I'm gonna fix that rattle. But in the meantime, don't tell anybody I made it.
And it looks quite different now if you've seen other ones. And no, maybe I shouldn't say this now to Linda. She's still listening. The Exploratorium on their website has a VR of the old one, still viewable.
Ew.
So maybe I can get them to do a new version to sub in, okay? I mean, I'll work on that part. Okay. So we're going to start out allowing each of our distinguished panelists to do an intro, starting with Linda. Up to 10 minutes, but you can take less. You're starting, Linda. Start us in a good way. So, and then I have some questions, and then we're going to get to your questions. So that's sort of the order of things. Go ahead, Linda.
So, looking at what you had written, that's projected, what resonates with me is being of the land. Yeah, I remembered that right. And that actually really, really reflects what my life has been. And even though it's only probably, I mean, right now in this context, I probably would be referring to the past 40 years or so. But actually, as I think about it, little me, who grew up in East San Jose, which you would not think of as being a place that would connect you with land. In fact, 74 years ago, when I was born, and then in the years since then growing up, well, not now, but anyway, in my early years, I spent most of my time roaming, the fields and looking at birds and looking for snakes and lizards and checking out all the little wildflowers. And my little 10 cents allowance a week that I got, I saved it up so I could buy these little field guides. The Golden Book of, flowers and the Golden Book of reptiles and no, but anyway, no, they were adult field guides, but they were little, and I loved those, and that's really what my life was about as a child. Of course, kids grow up and they become teenagers, and they change, and I really wasn't so interested in those types of things at that time, but I was always a maker from, the beginning. So I was making, but probably making different types of things at that time. And it wasn't until, some years ago, after I turned my attentions to finding out what our baskets were like, and then going through this whole journey of trying to find out first what they look like, because I had read what the anthropologist Alfred Kroeber had written, that all Ohlone baskets had perished. And so I thought, well, by that time I was a basket maker when I read that, but I had never had an opportunity to even know whether our baskets existed or not, because of growing up in modern times, basically being fully aware all of my life of my native Ohlone native heritage, though we didn't use that word back then. First time I heard it, I'm like, what is that word? Who are those people? We really didn't know that term. But I was fully aware, my family was aware, there was pride involved in our native heritage, but I really didn't know what that meant in terms of my life, or how does that make me different? I don't know. I mean, Indian culture was only what I had seen on TV and cartoons and the good old cowboy shows back then, which can be pretty awful when you see them now. So I really didn't know where I belonged, because we didn't do things different. We didn't wear feathers, we didn't do this, that, and the other, all those stereotypical things that as a child growing up was kind of burnt into my consciousness of associating with being a Native person. But I was a maker, and when I read what Kroeber had written, I was very disappointed, because I was a basket maker at that time, but I was using, other materials, not thinking or not knowing that, in fact, there are a few of our baskets, old baskets. So anyway, that was a journey. No time here for that, but the point being that I didn't realize until more recent times that all the things I was doing as a child, from very small, I was in training. I just didn't know it. I was in training for what I've been doing for the past 40 years, which is making our baskets, and a number of other things that I categorize as ancient technologies. And it's just that I needed access to that information, and eventually I found things pieced together, the puzzle pieces, and if we want to stick to basketry, was able to then begin making our baskets. And we probably have, it's a little hard to be specific and ascertain exactly how many of these old baskets that have been thought to be Ohlone are in fact Ohlone. I'm sure there are some that have been categorized as Ohlone baskets that in more recent years, because of the style of the start of the basket, things like that, we probably have ruled those out, and those are, more likely, or are Coast Miwok, et cetera, but in any case, let's just say there are approximately 24 or so baskets, old baskets, that are Ohlone. Well, the beautiful thing, to kind of summarize, since it's time for a little short story and connection, is that in these past 40 years, I have doubled that number, because I was so surprised when... Yeah, it was only, I don't know, in recent months, somebody asked me a question or something, and so I thought, so I kind of did a little count of how many baskets I've made, and it turned out to be 24. completed ones. I have, like about 6 that are partially made, but I thought that was really beautiful that it happened to be the same, number that we kind of associate with the number of old Ohlone baskets, that now there are twice as many in the world. So anyway, I know that didn't really talk about, specifically land base and things, but I think as we converse throughout this time, I can get down to some more specifics about that.
Well, I think that what we want to do as part of this panel is explain more of our philosophy. Usually we cater to other people's questions and answer them, and we're not really conveying our own feelings and thoughts. And part of it is that we don't make those artificial constructed differences between land and culture and life. It's all together. It's all part of one. So when we do talk about baskets, we are talking about the land, because that's where it came from.
Well, if you don't mind me adding one more thing, in essence, the bottom line is plants in particular, and all of these things that I make and do, the things that I need to make and do make require these plants, or in some cases, some other natural resources. And without those, these beautiful things cannot be. And they tell me what I have to do. I can say, but I don't have time to go dig sedge. I can say, but I don't really have time to go get willow sticks or, bay nuts or whatever. But the answer is, you may not have time, but you've got to do it anyway, because they're not going to be there for you in the right stage if you wait until you have time. So anyway, that it is my life.
And we're grateful for it. Chairman Bell.
Well, thank you very much. I want to first offer prayers and blessings to the Yamalu people of the past. I want to offer prayers and blessings to those who are here today, as well as prayers and blessings to all future descendants. That's very important. I want to talk a little bit about we say that the true history of California tribes, and particularly here in the Bay Area, the true history has never been told. It's been covered up, it's been denied, ignored, and forgotten. And a number of people today are fighting hard to bring that back and to ensure that history is told and that is never forgotten, and the people are never forgotten. And we're very thankful for that. Our creation story, one of the points of our creation story tells us very specifically, and it's using today's terms, that we are given the responsibility to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. Again, that's a today term, to take care of Mother Earth and all living things. Our ancestors took that very importantly. They learned how to take care of their environments. They learned how to ensure that there was enough food for the birds, for the rabbits, for the mice, for the bears, etc. They had that responsibility. And in order to fulfill that obligation, that's what they had to do. When people talk about our ancestors, they talk to them in terms of them being hunters and gatherers. That is so insulting. That is so insulting. They're hunters and gatherers. What the heck does that mean? Randomly they went through day by day, hunting for their foods, and they found a leafy plant that was edible. They were so darn lucky. They were able to kill a deer. They got to eat that day, and they were so darn lucky. That's not the way it was at all. Our ancestors took care of their resources, so it provided their foods year-round. I'll get back to that in a second, but when we talk about our ancestors, it's important that people recognize who they were. They were mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, aunts, uncles, grandmothers, grandfathers. They loved their children. They taught their children and all their relatives. Our ancestors were educators, doctors, scientists. They had trade routes that they managed and took care of. So they traded with tribes to the north, south, east, and west. Tell you a story that I've been telling lately. When I was in college, you take these classes in college, psychology, sociology, and all these classes that are the study of. But I often wonder, what the heck is science? That's not, there was nothing obvious about it, and nobody told me. I thought I might have cut school that day and missed it. But one night I drove my bike to the library specifically for the purpose of looking up what the heck science meant. And in the old days, they had all kinds of dictionaries laid out there, and I went through every one of them looking at what does science mean. And at the end of that, 3-4 hour study session, I ride my bike home with understanding science to mean the study of knowledge. And as I thought about that, and as I think about that today, the study of knowledge. All of our ancestors were scientists. They studied about the plants. They studied about the wildlife. They studied about the oceans, the rivers. They studied about the moon, the stars, the things above us, the things below us. And they learned to take care of them so that they could provide for us. And so thinking of that in terms of science being the study of knowledge, all indigenous people come from hundreds and perhaps thousands of generations of scientists. And that's who we descend from. Our ancestors learned very importantly about I have a stop clock here to keep me on time, and I've got to turn it on, sorry. Let me know when to get close. Will somebody do that for me, please? Thank you. Because I can go on for days. But there's a lot of important knowledges that our ancestors learned. One of them was, for example, that all plants have an obligation, and that obligation is to take care of the fungi. They have the responsibility to take care of the insects, the birds, the four-leggeds, and for people. Every plant has that obligation. We also learned that the plants are a sacred gift given to us by Creator. And as a gift coming to us from a Creator, we have a responsibility to be thankful, to understand it, to pray for it, to pray to it and for it. We have a responsibility to take care of that relationship. Talking about relationships, we look at all plants and all things really as being relative, our relative. And the way I like to tell that is that the plants, all things, have the same father that we do, Father Sky or Creator. They have the same mother we do, Mother Earth, that provides all things, all nourishment for us. So they have the same father and the same mother. Therefore, they're all our relatives, the rocks, the mountains, the animate, the inanimate. They're all our relatives, and we all have a responsibility for them all. But the plants were sacred gifts given to us from Creator. And the way our ancestors took care of the plants is they would not say, they saw a flower and say, oh, this is a beautiful flower. Wouldn't it look better on that mountaintop over there? And then they take it down and move it. No, our ancestors didn't do that. Our ancestors said, this is where that flower chose to be. This is where Creator put that flower or that particular plant. And so that's where we must take care of it at. And so we would work with that plant and try to expand that, and we would grow it into patches, is what we call it, patches. And we would try to grow those patches bigger and bigger and bigger, and realizing that it was an important food plant or a medicine plant or a plant for other resources, we try to grow those patches larger and larger so that they would provide for the needs of that particular population or that particular need that it provided for. And so over time, they started developing these patches, larger and larger patches. And that was an important way, the way they grew their food plants, their medicine plants, their basketry plants, their plants for babies' care, mothers' care, housing, clothing, cradle boards, etc. Those plants, when we look at these plants and stuff like that, we would see a grocery store, we would see a pharmacy, we would see a hardware store, and so much more. That's what those plants and trees represented to us and still represent to us today. When those first explorers were coming along the coast of California, starting in the latter part of the 1500s, they would document in their journals that when they looked at the central coast of California, that the central coast of California was a beautiful mosaic of different colors and different plants. And they thought that there was just happenstance or just coincidental, or it just happened. And isn't that neat that the cards fell out that way, got shuffled up that way? They did not recognize that our ancestors had been managing and stewarding those plants and that landscape for thousands of years to develop that mosaic of plants that provided for these landscapes. For that landscape. The central coast of California was recognized as one of the most biodiverse landscapes in North America. Think about that. In North America, how did that happen? It wasn't by chance. It wasn't by coincidence. It was intentional stewardship and management by our ancestors. They had the responsibility to take care of all the species of butterflies, all the species of bees. And I've learned that there's over 1,600 species of bees in California. That blows me away. How many people knew that? 1,600 species of bees. Oh, look at this. She's the one that was reading those books.
Learned it recently from a friend who's a beekeeper. I'm like, whoa.
Yeah. But, and that's the kind of biodiversity. We didn't have all 1,600 species here on the coast, but that's the kind of biodiversity that the state of that the Central Coast provided for. And that's just amazing to think. And then an important way that we maintain that coastal prairie, a very important way that we maintain that coastal prairie was the use of fire. Because without being able to keep that coastal prairie, without being able to burn that coastal prairie, these other plants would start coming on in and intruding. They first would come the shrubs, and then would come the pine trees, and that would be followed by the redwoods or other kinds of hardwood. They would start. Holy moly! You sure?
Same.
Okay, these other plants, these other shrubs would start moving in, and so we would burn the landscapes, and they were cultural burns, because if you burn at certain times of year, it really enhances that landscape. If you burn the seed plants at certain times of year, it ends up softening the seed, so you get a huge abundance of seed plants growing. And that was an important way of taking care of the birds, so that we get a huge abundance of seeds, of seeds growing. And we took care of the birds, we took care of other seed-eating animals. And seasonally, our diet, the diet of Native people, would be 40% seeds. We also realized that after, that second year after a burn, you'd get these higher shoots growing up. And that was a preferred foods for deer and antelope and other grazing animals, that third, fourth year, you start getting a lot of really bushy plants. And those were really important for providing a lot of our leafy vegetables and also for the berries and stuff like that. It also was important because it provided ground cover for the squirrels and the mice and the other animals so they wouldn't be so easy prey for the predator birds above. So these were all considerations of how our ancestors managed those landscapes. And we did that for thousands of years, and we would grow those patches bigger and bigger and bigger. And that's what resulted in that. I want to give one story that might take me over by a minute or two, and I apologize in advance. You know, there's a very significant coastal cultural site north of Santa Cruz. We don't want to give the location, but that site is 7,500 years old, and it's continuous. And the shell mound is, I forget how, 40 or 50 feet deep. And can you imagine a landscape where people would live on a single landscape that provided for them for 7,500 years? Do you think that the way we grow strawberries today, you think that strawberries will provide the strawberries we need for 7,500 years old? I mean, for 7,500 years? I can't imagine that ever happening. But 7,500 years, and we did a lot of research there. We wanted to see what the tribes was eating there, what seed plants they were eating there, what kind of fish were they eating, what kind of sea mammals and shellfish were they eating, what kind of mammals were they eating, etc. And we learned a lot there through that study. But I'm a simple guy. I'm not an archaeologist. I'm definitely not a scientist in the contemporary term used by the colonizers' term today of scientists. You know, but I'm an old school scientist. Go back to our ancestors. I look at that shell mound, and what I recognize immediately is all the shells are the same size. Isn't that amazing to see? You got 7,500-year-old mound, and all the shells are the same size. What does that mean? You know, it means to me that our people, they harvested very intentionally the mussels of a particular size. They would not harvest the large ones. They would not harvest the smaller ones. They knew what size to harvest so that they maintained a sustainable kind of food supply for themselves. And that's just one example. You know, when you look at the other ways that our people manage these landscapes and stuff like that, that's what we got to get back to. If we're going to survive and deal with climate change, that's what we got to get back to. I'll stop there. Thank you.
Oh. Thank you. So I have 3 burning questions and 2 extras if we have time, and they probably won't happen. But as I was reviewing last night, I figured, that one, that's a little, the way I phrased it is going to be interesting. That one too. So I'm going to put on my, those who are old enough to remember Columbia School of Broadcasting. Used to hear that on the TV years ago, right? So you get this deep voice on there, and they'd make some announcement. So here's my version, okay. The following opinions being expressed are the opinions of the speaker and not of the management staff of the Young Museum. Thank you. So let's get into the questions. And these are my questions. So as Chairman Val mentioned, the way we express it, and it's always been a kind of an odd way of expressing it, we've been here since time immemorial. And when I started working with archaeologists many decades ago, they were around the 6,000 to 8,000 year term at that point. And if you went 5 digits, 10,000 years, they thought you were really radical. We're now up to 15,000 or so, and some think much longer, and we think we've been here, always been here since near the beginning of time. And we were here at the beginning where the original first people, for lack of a better term. One elder said, yeah, they're the first people, we're the next people. And then somebody just recently said, yeah, and the colonizers here are the new people. So that's how it works. First people, next people, new people. And the new people have only been here 250 years or so here in California. But obviously we've had huge disruption to the way we connect and caretake our land. And in some cases, sadly, it's been completely severed. And the land has suffered, which we're seeing now, which is why agencies are coming to talk to us about how we can heal the land so they don't all burn up. So in the case of the communities here, how has your community approached that reawakening and restoring that indigenous connection that we knew about for thousands of years, and now we have to reawaken it? Linda?
This may not be what you have in mind, but it's what I have in my mind. So hopefully I won't disappoint people with my reply. But since you ask in the context of a group, us as a community, and so I am referring specifically right now to Rumsen Ohlone Tribal Community, which I actually just formally organized as, with a community name only about a year ago. But we are people who, are related, have known each other, done things together, but, we didn't necessarily know all of us. And I needed a way to bring us together, because through these numerous extended families, I knew quite a few, and but I didn't know everybody, and so I didn't know, cousin so and so's her cousins, and et cetera, et cetera. And I've spent all these years, pretty much 40 years now, finding this information through not very simple means. And it's taken a lot of effort. And this has become a natural part of my life, a natural part of my experience. But how was I going to share this with other people who shared my same, Rumsen heritage, when we don't live near each other? We don't, we had no particular means for, having, for exchanging information, for example, or even for everybody getting a chance to know each other. So in this past year, this is what I've been doing. Could you remind me what your question was again?
You're getting it.
Okay, but so this has been so cool because now because we can communicate in a lot of ways because of social media, for example. When you do not all live together physically in the same community or even in the same region, then it becomes very difficult to do things together and for sharing things. So I used to send out things to different people in the past, but it gets pretty hard to be emailing, and how am I going to email somebody I don't know yet, right? So, and then people who were close enough, I would take out to dig sedge for basketry, teach people how to make our baskets, harvest willows for baskets, or, et cetera, et cetera. There's yerba buena, there's yerba santa, there's bay nuts, there's whatever. It goes on. But how could I teach those things to a large number of people? How could I teach those things to a whole community of people who truly were hungry for knowing something more than just their genealogy, for example? So now I'm still wondering what your question was. So I
It
could,
was just a trigger.
wrap it up here,
That's
but
fine.
but do you want to give me a clue?
And you're really answering it.
for being able to consolidate here.
Well, I think you really were answering it because we're not answering it in the way
But
conventional.
tell me the question.
Right. I know that. Well, but I'm saying you're answering it, so you're fine. It's because we're cut off from our way of directly caretaking of our land over the last 250 years.
So for how to share, how we're sharing.
So how we're bringing it back, and
Right.
that's really what you're talking about.
And so for me, so I'm going to wrap it up here, this question. But for me, how to bring it back was I had to find this stuff to start with, all right? And it seemed like it was something that would almost be impossible to find. And some things still are, because so far as I can tell, there are quite a number of things probably, but there are things I haven't found the answers to yet, and a lot of times in the unpublished field notes of John P. Harrington, for example, where many, like really kind of almost firsthand or secondhand things are coming from that are very believable because of the sources. There are our own elders who were sharing these things, but, oh, wow, I lost my point in my mind. But anyways, help me out again.
Well, and again, you're actually doing it because we were cut off from our land. How are we bringing that back for in a community sense?
All right, so then I was saying how I had to find it first, right? And now I need to share it with everybody else because I ain't going to be here around forever, right? No, not going to happen. I used to really not be able to imagine myself dying. That seems so silly, but it is really hard. I mean, you know it, like because I used to think jokingly to myself, well, I never heard of anybody who didn't, right? And yet it's really true. Like when you really try to visualize and really try to relate to your own death, even though, you know it's going to happen, but it still is hard to relate to. It's getting easier to relate to now that I'm 74. But anyway, but that is why I think my sense of urgency has become more urgent. Because if not now, when, right? So now we have a vehicle for being together, for sharing, and via our Facebook group, via the fact that we have a website now for sharing information. Yes, the public can share it, but it also informs and educates our community. We're having a reunion later this month, only in a couple of weeks or so, I guess. And right now I am the common denominator for pretty much everything. But the goal is that others will learn, and others are still learning. And I really have to say, acknowledge some people. I'm sorry I can't, see the audience, but I wanted to say that there are some other Rumsen / Ramaytush relatives, first and second cousins of Greg's, and more distant cousins of mine, in the audience here who came today. And one of them is now an official basket apprentice with me for the coming year through the Alliance for California Traditional Arts. And yeah, Violet, she's up there somewhere.
Yeah, she's over here. I know exactly where she is. And now
right
she's
there now.
cowering down. So yeah, I was going to point her out, but
Right
thank you
there.
for doing it.
Yeah. On the outside.
Thank you very much.
And then
You're on the roll anyway.
And I know that Ruth Orta is here. I wanted to acknowledge her as well. Oh, somewhere up there I can't see. But yeah, so Violet's learning. Her mom is always with us. Her sister's with us today. Other people have been learning together. We're able to share information. People can ask questions. They can get answers. We can share family photos. We can do all sorts of things that we couldn't do before. And for us, this is the beginning. And this is an organization right now that hasn't reached out as far as it can. We just have a few extended families, and it's already at approximately 350 people. And when I have to tell you this one last little thing. I felt really, maybe this is sort of like silly. I felt apologetic, literally apologetic, but I knew from the beginning I'm making membership cards. I'm not a person who usually would, be into things like that. I didn't go to my own graduations from college, like I've really never been into that sort of thing, but somehow I just felt like I need to make membership cards. So the first ones, as I sort of made them in groups, I sent them to my friend. Is this being publicized? Like on the webs, online? I better not say her name. She doesn't want her name online, but not for any nefarious reasons. But I sent to her, I sent to another person, and in the card I said, well, apologetically, well, I know this might seem silly, but I just kind of felt like this, and maybe you'll find that it's useful or something sometime. Okay, so my friend wrote back, and actually she's a descendant of Isabel's mom, but not through Meadows. And I sent to a Meadows also. They both wrote back, but the first one, I can't say her name. She never writes in all caps, right? But her email was like, it's not silly. And the other person, the Meadows, Loretta Onesimo, but through the Meadows. And so my other friend is through Loretta's first husband, the Peralta line. Anyway, he wrote, and he said, I've got it in my wallet. I mean, these are like seasoned people close to my age. And people have told me, I mean, one cousin who's a Barcelona cousin, so she's much closer to me in terms of relationship, blood relationship, sent me a picture on Facebook, and I don't know if I've ever seen a happier looking face. I mean, more just like exuded pride and some sort of beautiful happiness. And she was holding that card because people have been hungry for so long, like exactly who are, like what, I know this, but I know who our ancestor was, but what does this mean for us? Like, and what can I do with that identity? And now we have a way for people to learn specific aspects of our culture, and it will become part of their lives like it has become part of mine. Yeah.
Oh. As Linda alluded to, we were part of the same extended family, and I remember growing up with just knowing who we were in the village, the Gluten, that many of us came from. And that's all we knew. And I found over the years that as I became an activist, to use that term, known as being Selene and Ohlone, they would expect you to be Indian, right? Like we're supposed to walk around with a loincloth. And I told Curdy right away, you're not catching me in a picture with a loincloth at all. That not happen.
If I was there, I would have said thank
No.
God.
Yeah. Yes. It would not.
Just at you, but
Yeah.
in general.
Well, yeah. I mean, that's we. Yeah, because I think our ancestors are much more athletic than us, much tougher. So, and I think there was what I've seen over the years is this process and steps of understanding and kind of accepting that idea that we are native. There's no breaking that apart from who we are, our identity. But we're supposed to like know what that means and act Indian, whatever that means to other people.
You got to be deep, everything you say.
Yes. You have to say it in a deep voice, too. And so and I've seen other people express like, and hopefully I don't offend anybody, especially my Indian relatives, but I've seen people over the years say stuff that I was like, that didn't happen. That's not true. But because they think they feel some shame at the fact that they got cut off from their knowledge. And we've now come to a place where we understand why, right? This 250 years was a specific plan to remove us from our culture. That was the entire purpose of it, at least starting in the missions and the early colonization. Of course, when statehood came along, they just wanted us dead, and they paid for it to happen. So now we're coming to a place where there's deeper understanding of what being indigenous means, and it's not being Indian. It's being Rumsen. It's being from the village of the Tukutnu. That's what it means to us, and understanding what that is. Just because you don't know how to do a basket yet doesn't mean you're not Rumsen. You're not from that village of Tukutnu. And I think that's where that process of undoing colonization that happened to us, the few survivors, is the process we're in. And you know, you're the premier person in the Ohlone country, in my opinion, for doing that, because it's about putting our hands in the ground, taking from it as a gift, and making these beautiful baskets you got out on your table, or did earlier. So,
well, and for me, the beauty, I mean, besides, you know, I mean, yeah, if there's something in front of you that's beautiful, then there's something in front of you that's beautiful. But in addition to that, or, you know, however I guess categorize it, but before these, what do we have for people to relate to our ancestors as creative, as resourceful human beings? Because we've had so little in the way of tangible objects, tangible things from the past that represent our people and our culture in the past. So all we've had are what, you know, mortars and pestles and, you know, things that aren't soft. And now I always felt like, well, somebody can, that's why whenever possible, I like to go ahead and let somebody hold my baskets, unless, you know, there's a few I say, maybe not. Yeah, especially, I guess, I'll refrain. I'll refrain from sharing what happened with one little girl in front of our table today. It would be not good. But it would be funny, but not good. So I won't tell you. But when someone can hold a basket now, then they can see and feel up close. They can look at the little stitches, and they can look at the simple materials, the roots and the sticks that became this beautiful thing. And they can appreciate, I just feel like it honors our ancestors, and it makes them like the human connection of their aesthetic ability, their human ingenuity. It makes it real. Yeah.
Thank you. So, Val, and just as a information, I did mention 5 questions, 3 essential. We're only going to get through 1, and then we're going to take community audience connections. But I've done these panels before, and I knew that was going to happen. So, go ahead, Val.
Let me take let me take it somewhere else, the conversation here or the presentation here. And this is triggered by what Linda said while she was talking. You know, and it ties to your original question also. You know, we went through 3 brutal periods of colonization. And all 3 of those periods of colonization, they wanted to destroy our culture, our spirituality, our environments, our indigenous knowledge, our humanity. They wanted to do a complete job on us. And they nearly succeeded. You know, we estimate the survival rate for Mutsun people at being, 2%. 98% perish during those tough times. You know, along the Santa Cruz up to Pescadero area, that's, for the most part, is a Waswas speaking tribes that were there. There were 7 Waswas speaking tribes. There's no survivor from any of them. No survivor. You know, how can that be? How can that be accepted? What happened? There's no survivors. And so when you look at our history that way, you know, when we were growing up, you know, our ancestors would not talk, like my grandmothers and stuff, they talked very little about that time. And as little kids, we would just really pepper them with a lot of questions, but we got very few answers. That, you know, I mean, it's hard to think of that, of surviving during that time. How do parents pass on love to their children? How do parents teach their children to be optimistic, to be hopeful, to know that tomorrow's going to be a good day, to be happy? How do parents teach their children to have a happy childhood? And imagine that going on for 4 or 5 generations or more. That is just, it's just tough. It is just tough. And so that's what we are trying to recover from. And we are recovering from it. When I first became chair, I'm going to just go with this if you don't mind. You know, when I first became chair, you know, I'm a Native American advisor to the National Alliance on Mental Illness. I've dealt with a lot of mental illness in my family and such, and I became an advocate for mental illness, and I still remain so today. So the tribe and mental illness advocacy are my 2 huge passions in my life. But our members knew that. And they would call me whenever things would happen, and I would talk to them. And when I first became chair, I got 4 calls in 1 week. And one call was from the mother of a grandmother. And the daughter was about to lose 3 children to adoption because of meth addiction. And she wanted to know if there's any way the tribe could help us, but they're going to court the next week. Another one is the same situation. The grandmother called and the daughter is losing her children to adoption again. That happens a lot in our tribe. Another situation is we had a 67-year-old addicted to meth. His wife was going to leave him, and he wanted to know if I could find him a traditional spiritual advisor. And then another one is we had a youth, 19 years old, I believe, maybe 20, going away to prison for a real long time for gangs and drugs and crime, heavy crime. And, you know, and so I would go to my room and close my bedroom door and take these calls for confidentiality. But after this right here, I was just sitting in my bed and said, how can we be a successful tribe? How can we, you know, expect anything more than this as a tribe? It says, we got to do something. And so, you know, we gave a lot of thought, a lot of prayer, talked to people, and we started wellness meetings, tribal wellness meetings, where we would talk about this. And a big part of that was restoring tribal identity and bringing back cultural knowledge to restore self-esteem and to let people know that their ancestors, they come from a long line of scientists, to let people know that the contribution, that their knowledge of how to burn, you know, of cultural burns is important and useful and is the way we got to get back if we're going to deal with issues such as climate change, to let them know about our native plants and our native foodways. How many of you know that I'm an English major too. How many of you knew or know that there are 8 different kinds of California Indian potatoes? How many of you have ever eaten a California Indian potato? Do I see a hand up there? Great. We have one hand up there. Was there another one?
There's a couple.
A couple. Oh, that's right, Rick, of course.
That was a cheat, though.
Yeah, but the point is, yeah, you're right, because that deep root system, et cetera. But the point is as our members started learning about this kind of knowledge and stuff like that we had, and they started learning about our history, what happened, that identity started coming back to them, and we had a lot of talk to them about how important they are, and how as being we only 2% of us survived, but the 2% survived for a reason. We didn't survive to get addicted to meth. We didn't survive to go to prison for be incarcerated for 30 years. We are here for a reason. And now we work with institutions like Berkeley and Stanford and UC Santa Cruz and UCLA. They want to work with us because they see that the way our ancestors took care of the lands, took care of the plants, the landscapes, the way that we developed sustainable food ways and stuff like that, that we need to learn that if we're going to survive and deal with climate change. And so it's, they searched us out. I was speaking at a climate change, I didn't know this, but I was a keynote speaker at a statewide, I thought I was just going to go out there and talk for 10 minutes and go sit down. But I was a keynote speaker. And we talked to, so I gave the talk on climate change, and I talked about some of the things I mentioned today. And at the end of that talk, a number of researchers, and they had researchers from companies, from research organizations. It wasn't all government. They came up and wanted to talk and see how they can learn more, and they just wanted to learn how they could make money off of it. And then a person from the UCLA came up and talked to us. And today we have we collaborate with them. We just got a $5 million 5-year grant with them to do research on ocean and coastal stuff, So, but the point is that research that we do with them is not research. That's validation. They're validating that the way our ancestors took care of Mother Earth is the way we need to get back to. Let me finish with this. What I tell our members now, I'm sorry to say in public here, is that, some tribes, folks are known for building pyramids, for developing aqueducts, for developing calendar systems and stuff like that. The California Indians are known for how to take care of Mother Earth, of how to take care of the environment. And that's what we can all learn from. And that's what we need to do.
I thought I'd like to share the good news. There actually are a lot of Awaswas people.
Well, please tell me where they are. I'll go.
Yeah.
Because we've been looking for them.
Okay.
Have been looking for them. Okay. I hope
Yeah.
we would.
Some of them and they just have not known all this time.
Reaching out too.
But
please tell us.
Yeah. I wanted you to have the good news.
Thank you.
Yeah.
That's very good news.
We're going to get questions now. So I just want to say, though, that part of what this question really answered is that in modern terms, we've been dealing with academics and others who have defined us and sometimes come to us and tell us who we are and explain what we are. And that's very interesting. But being, I said earlier, there really isn't any Indians. There are Rumsen people. There are people from the village of Tukutnut. There's people from the village of Limatam. Yeah, in Prustak. Yeah, those are who we are, and define who we are. We're not defined nowadays by what we do, but who we are can lead us back to what we used to do and what we need to do. So we Marie? Yeah, go ahead. So we're going to take some audience questions, and we have the wandering microphone over here from Maria. So
I couldn't hear when Linda said there actually are a lot of blind
Awaswas people, Santa
Awaswas.
Cruz. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Awaswas language speaking people. Yeah.
Thanks.
Hello, and thank you so much for this beautiful conversation today. I'm a documentary filmmaker, and I'm working on a story about freediving and spearfishing in Monterey County. And there's this story going on there about the invasive purple urchin. And you were talking about not taking a plant from one place and moving it to another, but cultivating it where it falls naturally. And so because we've shifted so far out of this balance, and now we have these invasive things that are destroying the kelp forest, for example, how do we get back into right relation? Because it is also like a destruction of this creature, and so you're it's like a splitting of hairs, or a categorizing and valuing of different lives or different forms of life. So how do we get back to right relation in those circumstances?
I'll take a stab at that right off. I think part of it was part of my question, that the modern society, modern world, I hate to use the word science, but that's included actually, looks as nature as a inanimate object and tool, and kind of views it as a Legos that they can just rearrange at random and however they want. And there's another way of thinking about it, and I'll share a more modern story. We're working with the Cultural Conservancy, which is based here in San Francisco, but does work in many, many places around the world. And they recently acquired a farm just north of here, east of Sebastopol, I think, and called Here in Shadow. And when they first got there, they had local cultural advisors, one in particular, Redbird, he's called, Edward Willie, and asked him, well, this is your homeland, what should we do? They're looking for rules and a plan and operations and all that kind of stuff. He said, nothing. And he went, nothing? Yeah, nothing. Go sit on the land and do nothing. It will tell you what it needs. It will tell you what to do if you learn to listen. Because we need to relearn what our ancestors knew, that these are integrated, very intricate systems. And you can't just unplug it. It's like taking off a tire of a car and expecting it to still go down the freeway. And you always can't take that same tire and plug it on another vehicle and expect it to work the same. And in this case, you're looking at some significant damage by doing it. So it's not always invasives per se to that area, but it's not in the place it's supposed to be. So even a native going someplace else can be very disruptive. So we just need to, as we're experiencing now with our communities, agencies are coming to us and asking us, right, out of desperation in a lot of cases, because their landscapes, their lands, and in some cases towns and people are burning up. And they're desperate because what their knowledge isn't covering what's happening. So they're coming to us and asking us. What they really need to do, because we're not creating this, we're sharing what we've learned from the land itself over tens of thousands of years. And that's what they need to do. Learn what the land needs, not what they need.
But in fairness, I would like to add, though, that in my experience, Monterey area, in fairness, some organizations and agencies are coming to us really because of goodwill. Yep. Because there's a lot of goodwill and awareness today that we did not experience even 30 or 35 years ago. And so I want to acknowledge that and appreciate that, yes, because there's a lot of good people and a lot of just desire to support us and to help find ways to allow us access and those kinds of things. Yes, definitely have encountered an awful lot of barriers, and I still do, but at the same time, I see very sincere efforts right now with some organizations to try to turn that around. But it can be a bit complicated. Somebody who might be in the audience now here we had a conversation, and he's grappling with that and trying to figure out how to help make that, how would I put it? I'm not him, so I'm not doing his thing, but he's trying to find ways to help facilitate those kinds of positive changes. And so we did talk about some of the, was that you? Yeah, I thought so. Maybe behind the mask it was hard to tell, but yeah. So there's a good-hearted, smart and good-hearted person right here in the audience who, I don't think nobody's paying you to do that. I don't think. He's doing this because he cares. But people in agencies are trying to, improve things for all of us.
I definitely agree with that. There's been a sea change, especially in the last 5 years. And some of it's propelled by young people who just have a different frame of mind. So that's a promising aspect and a blessing. And organizations overall are doing that, like the Young.
Yeah, exactly.
Thank you.
That's why we're all here, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
Exactly.
Sorry, but hopefully the conversation can continue after. We want to welcome people into the exhibition, which is open for you now. And this conversation will continue. We have another program scheduled for November, on November 4th. And the subject of that public program and panel discussion, which Greg is also moderating, will be land back, real-world examples of land back or repatriation in California. So we hope you'll join us and enjoy the exhibition. And thank you so much. Thank you to our wonderful panel today, Greg, Linda, and Val. And to all the other participants in the project who joined us here today. We're so appreciative of your presence. Thanks again.